Hi everybody. I just wanted to set up my camera and do a bit of a story time as far as healing project stage 4 cancer goes. I'm doing really well over here. I feel really good. I'm almost 100% pain free. I still have a little bit of achy hip and sore muscles along the right hand side because like when the hip goes, the whole body is involved. So I'm achy, but nothing that a good massage or just like a hot bath can't solve. It's like, no big deal. So I'm feeling really good these days. The story that I wanted to talk about today, though, is a little bit about my medical history. And a lot of people won't know this story because I don't talk about it a lot. This cancer scare is not the very first time that my life has been threatened. When I was at the ages of 17, 18, 19, and 20, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I was having stomach pain, a lot of stomach pain. I was working really hard. I had 2 jobs. I was a cocktail waitress at Jack Astor's. That was like one of my first jobs. And I was working really hard. I wanted to move out west. And I was working until 4 o'clock in the morning every night. I was eating donuts and drinking Diet Coke for breakfast, just like typical teenage diet. And then I was going back to my second job at the mall. I worked at the mall during the day, and then I worked as a cocktail waitress at night. So my diet was bad. I ate food court food for lunch, and then I would go do my cocktail shift, and then after cocktail shift I would order some nachos and chase it with beer, just like living the life, right? Like really burning the candle. But that's normal when you're like 19 years old, 18 years old. I guess it's not really that normal, but I was not well, and I kept having stomach pains, and I would just ignore it because I was like, oh, I'm eating bad, or I'm too tired, or whatever, and just ignore it. But I didn't have time to prepare food. I didn't have a kitchen in my apartment. I was living alone. And so things came to a head. I was with my boyfriend and we were at the movies, and I got sick. Like I started throwing up. So we had to go home, and I was like, it's just a stomach virus, no big deal. I couldn't stop throwing up. It's like 3 days later, I went to the doctor. The doctor was like, just take the ginger ale. It's just something that needs to pass. You'll be fine. 4 days in, 5 days in, I was just like really sick. And then I don't really remember anything that happened in that time. I apparently was passed out, taken by ambulance to the hospital, and rushed into emergency surgery, where the doctor opened me up. They thought it was appendicitis. They opened me up and they realized that I had diseased bowel, seriously diseased bowel. Not only was the bowel disease, it was actually perforated. So any of my waste, which was like super toxic, because it makes me laugh because my rap name in the family is Little Toxic Waste. But anyways, my waste was leaking into my body, into my bloodstream, and I was septic. My blood cell count the doctor said it was shocking that I survived and that I was still alive. So that led to, they sewed me up, they fixed me up. They had to remove a small portion of bowel that the hole was in, and then started my journey into Crohn's disease. That was like another 2-3 year journey of pretty much hell. There was a lot of pain involved. There was a lot of doctor's appointments. There was a lot of like colonoscopies and tubes down the throat, tubes up the butt, tubes. It was brutal. It was brutal times. And I couldn't really find a decent doctor. I had to sort of kick and scream a little bit. eventually found a decent gastroenterologist in Toronto who was willing to take me on. By that point, I was like, it was a year and a half later. I had been struggling with this Crohn's disease. I had been taking steroids. I had been taking all kinds of drugs. I'd been taking injections. Nothing was working. I had cleaned up my diet a little bit. Like I knew that eating this junk food was definitely not the way forward for this type of condition, but I wasn't really great. Again, like it was just time, because all this while I still had to keep working because I was living alone. I needed to pay my rent, needed to pay my bills. Times were tough. Times are really tough. I was living in Toronto. My parents lived up in Barrie, which is where we live now, but like Barrie's like an hour away from Toronto. My mom was very sick. My dad was taking care of my mom. Everybody, my sister was living in Florida. Like I didn't have a lot of support. My boyfriend was not super helpful at the time. It was just teenage stuff, you know. So eventually I had to be hospitalized because of the pain in my bowel, and I just couldn't function. I passed out. I was losing so much weight. At one point, I think I went down to 89 pounds, which is like my lowest ever. Even through all the cancer and the chemo, like 89 pounds was a low point. Really, really low. Nothing fit me. I looked dead. I was really, really sick. And they admitted me to hospital because they knew that my blood counts were just dangerously low and I wasn't doing well. So that was what actually started me on my drug addiction journey. Once I entered the hospital in Toronto, I was Wellesley Hospital. I didn't really make it out for about 300 days. I spent half of my 18th year and half of my 19th year in a hospital bed. I had 2 surgeries during that time. One was an ileal resection, and the other one was actually just investigative, where they didn't do anything because they opened me up and they decided that everything was just too messy, and then they closed me back up without doing anything. Off you go. Sew me up, off you go. You're a mess. You're not going to survive this. This is like worse than we've ever seen. But while I was having this hospital stuff and these surgeries, and I was having intravenous Demerol, which is a heavy narcotic opioid. I was having it intravenously because I was always hooked up to an IV, which it's really strong. And I was like blasted, knocked out, passed out all the time. Like I was just like, oh, it was really intense. So I started to enjoy this Demerol going into my veins. At first I didn't like the feeling. I was like, oh God, I'm out of it. I don't like this feeling. Then you just start to get used to it. And all your problems kind of go away. Like you're really just kind of like, I feel numb, and I don't have to worry about this fucking Crohn's disease, the fact that I'm lying in a hospital bed, the fact that I've had to give up my apartment and I don't even know where my car is parked right now in the world. Like it could be at my parents'. I don't even know. I didn't know what was happening. And I was scared, but I was like trying to put on my bravest face and be tough and whatever. But this Demerol just like helped. The numb was good. So I learned how to manipulate my IV, like the drip, how fast it went into my body. Back then it wasn't attached to like a pump. Nowadays I think when you're in a hospital you're on a pump, and the nurses fix the drip as to how fast it's going to drip or whatever. But this was back in the day when you just had a little like knobby thing that you just crank it up, feed it in fast. And I also learned when doctors were coming on shift and nurses were coming on shift, and when I could ask for more drugs, even though it wasn't my time to ask for more drugs. I was really being manipulative with the drugs. I was hooked. I was totally and utterly hooked on this hardcore opioid. So there was a doctor that was coming into town, a New York gastroenterologist, who I knew that I needed to see. I needed this ileal resection because it was the one bit of bowel that was giving me all the problems, and I vowed if I could get this bit of bowel that was giving me all the problems out of my freaking body, I could fix myself, I could change myself, I could heal myself, and I would just move on with my life. That was in my head, like I know I can do this. Have this stubborn streak. So they told me I couldn't get an appointment with him. He only came to Toronto every 8 weeks to do surgery, and then he was in and out. And I was just stubborn. I was like, I will get an appointment with this doctor. And I tricked my way into his office, and I got to speak to him. And he said to me, I will give you this surgery. I will perform this surgery on you, but the next round of what is in your battle of Crohn's disease is, you know, you're either going to die or you're going to have so much bowel removed from your body that you're going to have an ileostomy bag or ileostomy bag, ostomy bag, and you're going to be, it's possibly going to damage nerves in your spine because it was like towards my back, and he said you're going to be wheelchair bound, and all these, like, I don't know whether he was trying to scare me into not having that surgery or what he was doing, but for me it was pure motivation. I was like, no problem, give me this surgery and I'll do this. So I had the ileal resection, and then I was released from the hospital after that. Once I healed, like it was like about 4 weeks later, they let me go. And because obviously I couldn't have the IV Demerol anymore, they prescribed me Tylenol with codeine, like Tylenol 3s. And that was not good enough for me because Tylenol 3s upset my stomach. So I already had an upset stomach. I had fucked up stomach. So I couldn't be more sick on the Tylenol while trying to heal from this. It was just crazy times, but I needed that drug. I needed to deal with my Crohn's disease, and I needed to deal with this major drug addiction. I had been taking the Demerol for about 300 days. Like the entire time that I was in the hospital, I had been taking these drugs. And nobody noticed. None of the nurses or the doctors noticed that I was a drug addict all of a sudden. This like 19-year-old girl. Nobody was paying any attention. So I couldn't take the Tylenol 3s because they affected my body so bad. So the only thing that I could get my hands on, and here we go again, Hollis and her cannabis, but literally the only thing I could get my hands on was dry bud flower weed. And I smoked it, and I smoked it, and I smoked it, and I smoked it, and I smoked it. And then eventually I got clean off of the Demerol. And, you know, the cannabis is definitely not addictive, so I didn't need to keep taking that. So I'm so lucky that I wasn't smart enough at the time to go to another doctor to get another prescription and play that game. I just didn't realize that you could even do that. So I didn't do that. So I took the cannabis, I used that to get off the Demerol, and I got clean. I wasn't hooked on the weed. I gave that up eventually because you can't really afford it. And yeah, back in those days it was expensive and it was hard to get your hands on. You had to do like underground, underground, what am I trying to say here? Like deals, like real drug deals, you know, which is like super dodgy, and who the hell wants to do that? Anyways, thank you, cannabis, for that one. So I fixed the drug addiction, and now I needed to fix the Crohn's disease. So I ended up having enough money in my savings to move out west because I had been working so hard before I went into this hospital. And then when I was in the hospital, I didn't need to pay for rent or anything like that. So I had my savings there, and I moved out to Vancouver, which was a totally life-changing experience for me. It was really eye-opening. It's really healthy lifestyle out west, and everybody's like eating healthy and like eating sushi all over the place, and sushi wasn't really a thing that was like trendy back then, and I was like, everyone's eating this like fish and rice and seaweed, and like the farmers markets are like on every single corner every single weekend, and everybody's walking and everybody's skiing and everybody's swimming and everybody's running and everybody's just so healthy. Everybody rides a bike, you know. So I joined in. I totally started exercising. I started going to the farmers market. And when I was going to the farmers market, there was a culinary school attached to the farmers market, Granville Island Market, and the Pacific Institute for Culinary Arts is in the market space. And I had my eye on it, and I was working I was serving at a restaurant called Earl's, and I was talking to the kitchen manager. His name was Chris. I can't remember his second name, but he really kind of changed my life. And at that time, I read Anthony Bourdain's book, Kitchen Confidential. Also changed my life. So Chris suggested that I move from serving to a kitchen position, and I was hesitant to do that because I made a lot of money serving. Earl's on Robson was a really super busy restaurant. But I did it. I took that pay cut. I continued serving, but I took an extra part-time job in the kitchen. And the rest is history. I enrolled in the culinary school. I changed my diet completely. Every single thing that I ate was made by my hands. Every single like chicken breast was cooked by me. Every single, I kind of quit bread. I quit sugar. And I started incorporating all kinds of vegetables. I started experimenting with smoothies and like with a blender, and my eyes were opened and my mind was open. And slowly but slowly, I weaned myself off of the autoimmune Crohn's drugs that I had been taking, you know, for the last like 4 years. So, Crohn's disease is an incurable autoimmune disorder that affects the digestive system. It really wreaks havoc on your body. But since I made the change in my diet, I don't suffer from Crohn's disease anymore. I still have lots of the bowel removed from my body. So I do suffer from like some mild side effects from that, and also nutrient absorption. Certain parts of your bowel absorb certain nutrients, and but I know which part of my bowel was removed in order to supplement and replace the nutrients that you need in your body. One of them is B12, and it's super essential to your central nervous system. So I definitely have been taking a B12 supplement for, how old am I? I'm 39. So this is literally like 20 years of, yeah, I'm good, I'm healthy. And so the reason that I'm telling this story is because people look at me sideways when I tell them that I'm treating cancer with nutrition. I also am treating cancer with pharmaceutical drugs, and I treat cancer integratively, which means I use conventional medicine, but I definitely use nutrition to treat my cancer. And I know that nutrition is that powerful because I cured myself of an incurable autoimmune disorder once before, 20 years ago. There's a Greek doctor, Hippocrates, like from the ancient times, and he was a healer, a true healer. Like, you know, nowadays when you say doctor, ain't nobody healing anymore. Hippocrates was a healer. And his famous quote is, "Let food be thy medicine." And this was like way back in ancient times. And it's so very true. If your food has a commercial on TV, you've got to stop eating it. Off my soapbox now, I just saw Bowie pull into the driveway. She's at a birthday party today, so she just got home. And she's not driving, obviously. She's 11. Somebody's dropping her off. But I just wanted to say these words and tell you a little bit of my past and my story and what I've been through, which was hellish back then. And this also is hellish right now, but you stay as positive as you can. You stay as in control of the things that you're in control of as you can. The rest of it is out of your control. And yeah, you can do a lot of things with a positive mind, some serious nutrition, and help from your loved ones. So that's me over and out for this video, and thank you so much for watching. I applied to monetize my YouTube videos a little while ago. I don't know if they'll accept me because you need something like 4,000 hours of viewership, and I only have 2,200. So if you could like my videos, I guess, that is always helpful for me. Hi, honey. How are you? And that's me signing off for this time. So thanks for all of your support and care, and I'll talk to you soon.